The hymn that we have for today is what my choir master growing up would have referred to as an old chestnut. It would be surprising that most people have heard of this, if not sung it, if not know it pretty much by heart, even if you're not someone who normally sings with the hymns. It's a well-known hymn. And to be perfectly honest, I thought for sure that this was one of the ones that was written by the famous Methodist hymnist, John and Charles Wesley. But when I started to do research into this particular hymn, I discovered instead it was written by Augustus Toplady. What a neat name. Augustus Toplady was an Anglican priest in the late 1700s, and this particular hymn was first published in 1775 in the October issue of the Gospel magazine. This set of lyrics has two different origin stories, one most likely and the other one most fantasy. The truer or more believable version is that Toplady took his inspiration from a 1673 sermon by Daniel Brivant that is still in print 100 years later after he originally delivered the sermon. So you have to believe that that was a pretty impressive sermon. Now, the better version, the more interesting one, and the one that's most likely not true, was that one day, Toplady, who was a curate assistant, in other words, in the Church of England, as usually a curate was focused mostly on preaching. So one time as a curate, he was in the village of Blagden, and he was traveling along the gorge, and he was trapped in the midst of a storm. So he looked around and tried to quickly find somewhere to shelter. And he found that there was a small gap in the gorge. And as he ran into it to find shelter, he was struck by the title of what came to be known as this hymn, and he scribbled down the initial lyrics in that moment. However, whether you like that version or the more practical version of the story, it's never been in question that Toplady would be rather upset to hear that he would be compared to John Wesley. So I must say, I have to apologize in advance to both of the gentlemen. As a Wikipedia article tells us, quote, notwithstanding the bitter pamphlet war between Augustus Toplady and John Wesley over the correctness of Calvinist/Reformed theology versus Arminian theology, there has been speculation by some that, although Toplady was a Calvinist, the edited version of the words, be of sin the double cure, save from wrath and make me pure, suggests that he agreed with the teachings of the Methodist preacher Wesley, under whom he received his religious conversion, and of his contemporary, who taught that the double cure, which a sinner is saved by the atonement of Jesus and cleansed from inbred sin by the infilling of the Holy Spirit. So apparently these two men were at loggerheads with one another on their opinions of this theological debate. However, in Toplady's own published 1776 hymn text, the version, now referred to as the alternate version, contains a variant different from Wesley's teaching, and it reads instead, be of sin the double cure, save me from its guilt and power. So, while it's nice to think that he accidentally agreed with Wesley at some point, it really seems to be a stretch to assume that he would say that they were in agreement about anything. But it does help us to understand that theological oddity that pops up in that first verse. And now I'm sure that you have been in anticipation trying to figure out what hymn is it that we're talking about. So now take a moment, settle into where you are, and let's hear the words to the hymn, Rock of Ages. Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy wounded side that flowed be of sin the double cure. Cleanse me from its guilt and power. Should my tears forever flow? Should my zeal no languor know? All for sin could not atone. Thou must save, and thou alone. In my hand no price I bring, simply to thy cross I cling. While I draw this fleeting breath, when my eyelids close in death, when I rise to worlds unknown and behold thee on thy throne, Rock of Ages, cleft for me, let me hide myself in thee. And so here's the questions I'm going to leave with you to ponder. First off, what do you think about the idea that they were debating and discussing and arguing over? This idea of double cure, needing to be saved by Jesus's death, and then again be saved by the Holy Spirit entering into our hearts. The second question is to think for a moment about the image of a cleft in a rock. How does that image resonate with you as a metaphor for the safety that you feel in God's presence? The underlying implication of this hymn is the idea of surrendering everything to God because we can't save ourselves. So have you ever experienced a time or an event in your life where you have found yourself needing to do this or wanting to do this, to turn it all over to God? Think about that moment for a little while and how did it feel to surrender? So I'll leave you with those thoughts and hope to see you again tomorrow. And until then, take care and God bless.